So I've been captured lately by the world of the Wheel of Time series and am doing something with the conlang from that series. The Old Tongue, or Kaistomor, I've translated it. And I don't really know what I'm doing with it. And I'm out on a limb with conlanging, this sort of half learning and half developing. Anyway, I'm out on a limb with all of this, and I'm not confident in what it will become, but whatever this project is that I have undertaken, I'm taking it to heart because that's just my way of things. So it feels like, a creative project such as this, I'm really feeding my life into it, and the most quick of me goes into it. So yeah, anyway, I'm taking it to heart. So I want to document to a sufficient extent the process that I can see how it goes and keep track and keep everything coherent, and so that I can learn how to do this with more confidence. Anyway, obviously I am having to navigate a lot of fears, especially with conlangs, because they're require more precision than, say, writing a poem or story. I'm more comfortable with that, but a conlang has a lot of structure, and a lot of structure that I don't understand, a lot of terminology, and I'm just not an expert, nor do I have the desire, and therefore the discipline or ability to be an expert in scientifically accurate conlanging, etc., as many people are who make them. So I feel like rather an imposter, and I'm nervous that this project will fail, basically, that it will finish and just be worthy of mockery and to be laughed at, or that I'll get stuck somewhere with it, box myself in the word meanings with the structures, and it will end up useless, or just that whatever I'm creating amid the myriad other conlangs and other projects in the world, that there's no place for it, that it's not legitimate, etc. So this is an effort to keep those at bay so that I can go forward and see what happens. I split my time pretty much between reading the books, working on the language, and just resting. Not enough. Taking enough breaks from that to take a step back. Anyway, the primary principle. So I can't really, it doesn't work for me to have very rigid discipline. I can't. It just fall apart. So my primary principle with this is not to force it, and especially because if I force it, it will turn out to be artificial, and that's what I'm trying to avoid. So not to force it, not to be super disciplined about either the gathering information or shaping the language or learning it. But I have a decent feel for things, whether it feels about right, what I want to do, which direction I want to go. If I pay attention, I have a good feel for it. So my primary principle is simply to follow the instinct and desires that I have, and let the language grow and shape and take form as it feels right, and back up often, such as I'm doing now, to check if everything holds, and make sure that it's still holding together. So that's the method that I'm using. My goal for the language, purpose for the language, just that it would stay alive, being flexible, capable of change and growth, and also have a coherent identity as itself, and not just be like a mishmash of, one of those I would like to avoid having a kitchen sink conlang, which I know happens a lot. Although it depends on who's judging it. Always depends on who's judging it, but so like as long as I can use the language, and as long as from my position it holds together and is a living thing, which serves its own, has its own sort of place and is itself. And again, for it to be also flexible and capable of change, because languages are always changing, which is the beautiful thing about them, and anything is always changing, and my inner topography of meanings and words and webs is just constantly changing, so that if this language is very stiff and only encodes like where I am right now, I will grow out of it instantly. Anyway, then secondarily, that it would embody, of course, the spirit of Wheel of Time, where I'm like getting it from, I don't really know frankly what I'm doing, but I'm like building up, who knows. So to embody that spirit and what I like from the Wheel of Time that draws me to it, and also of my way of seeing in my categories, so that it will be something that I can use and it has that feeling. So it's mostly just keeping track of whether everything is seeming healthy and coherent, and being patient and letting things. So if I think of it as, I think of the language of project as a sort of center or something, like a plant or something in the middle, and then certain threads feeding it. Obviously this principle is the way that I'm going about things. Then I have a certain parameters that I want, and that I want to make sure I'm continuing to produce, viz. To be alive and to embody the spirit, that its own characteristic spirit, instead of, again, trying to be in competition with other conlangs. Like, things that could pull it out of that would be, like, if I go into comparing myself to other people and what they're doing, then the language will not be its own self. It will just be trying to compete, and it will not be manageable. Anyway, so a center with certain threads. I am drawing on sort of one after the other and weaving these together, and whenever I feel like one or the other, I switch to that for a while. So first of all, obviously, the pieces of the language that are canon from like the Wheel of Time material, which is a word list, some grammar, limited grammar, and then the system of the wheel and the pattern, the threads and everything, which is very transparent to me and I like a lot. So that. Secondarily, my personal vocabulary of like categories, patterns, actions, gestures, which more and more I live by and like perceive the world this way, but in most cases there's not really words for it, and it would be helpful to have these things more firmly encoded in words as they become stable parts of my way of life. Thirdly, just the sort of dry and factual patterns of linguistics. So like when watching other people's conlang videos, looking up the grammar of other languages, this stuff is hard for me to get through, quite opaque to me. I don't really understand the terminology. It sort of gives me a headache. It's like hitting a wall sometimes with that. But I need to know, I need as much of it as I need, however much of it I need, to properly order the language and like to get ideas and to figure out what is possible. Semitic can. Like I speak a couple of languages, but I still find it helpful and necessary to draw on more like pure linguistics. And then I have notes in my notebook. I have notes on Scrivener. I have thoughts in my head, and if I pull back, I can see that there is a certain network and thread that's forming. or web that's forming, and I think it should be something. I don't know. We will see. But anyway, this would be my... Technically, I did try to make a conlang before, but that was just because I wasn't allowing myself to learn Totopono. So that is mostly just a little bit of like raw linguistics information that I can now use toward this. But yeah. Those are the parameters of this project, and